we're going to go ahead and get started because we do have a long agenda and I'm mindful of everybody's time. So I'd like to call the CRMA Board meeting on December 14th at 9:06. So we're now in session. Any public comment, Mr. Tess?
None received.
Thank you. Item number 3, adoption of minutes for the CRMA special board meeting of December 2nd, 2016.
Ma'am, if I could read into the record a revision. We note that under item 6 from the minutes that Mr. Fernandez was not actually present during the third and final motion. Aside from that specific revision, I believe the rest of the minutes are okay.
Motion approved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item number 3 have been adopted with those changes. Item number 4, presentation and update on the Border West Expressway project by the Texas Department of Transportation. Mr. Tess?
Yes, ma'am. It's been some time since we've had TxDOT and their joint venture partner come to the RMA to brief the RMA on the developments to date. So today we have with us several representatives from their team. I'd like to invite them up to the podium to brief you on the developments.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
See if I can navigate this since this is my first time here. My name is Jason Gum, and I'm the commercial manager for the Abrams-Kiewit joint venture team that's constructing the project. First off, I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you to the board for allowing us the opportunity to showcase our progress. We believe we've made considerable progress since the last update, so we're excited to share that information with you guys today. The things I'd kind of like to discuss today revolve around safety, our people, and then give you a project update by work area, and hopefully leave some time for some questions if you have those. For our safety part, I'd like to showcase something that we think is unique to our construction industry, and it's something we call a CIVIS program. CIVIS stands for Craft Voice and Safety. This is a program that our partner Kiewit started back in 2010 to try to engage our workforce to be more upfront in our safety program and bring concerns to us instead of, a lot of times we find that workers have a hard time talking with their management and bringing up issues proactively. And what we found is through this program, and it's really a peer-to-peer network, that we've helped achieve our goal and nobody gets hurt. We've seen a lot of more involvement from our craft. We actually have craft workers on our job that we just specifically allocate to a safety role versus having tools on their belt, so to speak. So they're always out there as an extra set of eyes, and also for a communication medium with our people to raise any kind of safety awareness programs. We do monthly newsletters to communicate what we've done. We've got a You Ask, We Did program to showcase that we did follow through with commitments that were brought up. So we think it's a pretty interesting and neat program that's very unique to our industry. I just wanted to make sure we showcase that to everybody on the job. Finally, our project team, I think you guys mentioned it, we're definitely partnered heavily with TxDOT. We've leveraged our joint venture partners of J.D. Abrams and Kiewit together, and also our designer, who is Stantec, to continue to work on the job. And finally, as far as people go, right now we're sitting at approximately 550 people. That would be including subcontractors, employees. How that breaks down is we have approximately 250 craft employees on the project and 150 staff. We do plan to ramp up another 70 or so craft employees after the first of the year due to the work that's coming available. And we currently have 24 active subcontractors working on the project. That will also ramp up next year as we start doing more work like landscaping, aesthetics improvements, painting, those types of things as those come online. So we've got quite a few opportunities for local businesses to get involved in the job, and we've been making sure that we solicit bids from them for work on the job. The project's broken up into 4 main work areas. You can see them on the screen here. You might notice that the numbers don't run 1, 2, 3, 4 in order. They actually coincide with how the project's design has evolved. It's one of our philosophies on the joint venture to break a big job up into small, more manageable pieces. That's somewhat of the reason that we broke the job up into work areas. Work area 1 is our Coles-Paisano interchange area, which is on the very east end of the job. Involves mainly a lot of bridge and wall work and some intersection work as well, and to improve that intersection. Started clear back in the summer of 2015, actually. Expected to go almost to the end of the project. Some major developments or major accomplishments we've done is we've actually been able to demolish 5 out of the 9 buildings that were required to do the improvements. We were able to set our first structural steel girders, which was a major milestone on the project. We also placed our first bridge deck in this location back in August. And approximately 45% complete with bridge construction in that area. We've also started our concrete paving operations over there. It's our first concrete paving on the project, and that work's about 20% complete. So what you're going to see next is we're going to continue to finish our direct connectors from 375, and also you'll start seeing us getting to the middle of Paisano Drive and start some of that city street work next year. This is just a rendering of that interchange from our designer that shows the new direct connect bridges and how the traffic will flow in that area. And here's some progress photos. The upper left photo is a concrete paving photo. Very challenging placement, actually. It's not too often that we use a pump truck to place concrete paving, but we didn't have a lot of access in this particular placement, so it's kind of a unique portion of the job. We've also seen some of the bridge substructure work in the lower left go up, and then finally the girder setting I spoke of earlier, picture on the right. Work area 2 is probably the largest work area on the job that kind of runs basically from Racetrack Drive clear down to the Spur 1966 bridge. Encompasses a lot of grading work and retaining wall work with some bridges mixed in. That work also started in the summer of 2015 and will also run towards the end of the project. A lot of major work happened to this last period in that area. We actually completed all of our bridge demolition that was required to facilitate the job. We're 90% complete with the building demo, and we've actually moved over 1.2 million cubic yards of dirt in that area. We've got construction underway on 16 of the 23 total bridges in the area, and over 400,000 square foot of MSE retaining wall is underway or completed in that work area 2. Some other milestones that were huge to getting us going this last 6 months was some major utility relocations. We've done a lot of El Paso water and sewer line relocations, and also some major fiber optic lines that were in conflict at the Executive Center Boulevard intersection, which is facilitating getting that intersection completed. What's next is we plan to open the eastbound Doniphan Drive and the Paisano area in early 2017. We're right now currently shooting for a February timeframe, which would alleviate some of the congestion you see on I-10. It's a major milestone for the job. We've partnered with TxDOT to allow us to close that whole interchange, or whole road down, which is helping us expedite the construction. So we've very much appreciated working with TxDOT to get that done, and we look forward to seeing cars drive through there and people being able to make it to work earlier maybe in the day. We're also going to finish demolition of the rescue mission and the silos, so that'll probably change the landscape of El Paso a little bit. Those buildings have been there for quite some time, but that should come down in January. We'll also continue with our asphalt paving and concrete paving in this work area. We've got a lot of major retaining wall work that's going to get underway after the first of the year in the railroad pinch point area from the Union Pacific. We're working heavily with Union Pacific to minimize train outages and to coordinate with them on a daily basis. It's been a humongous effort for the job in TxDOT, and we continue to make strides in that regard. We've also started our drill and shoot or blasting work. Those of you that, if you came to work real early in the morning the last few weeks here, you might have noticed we had some rolling safety barricades happening through I-10 to help us make sure that we did that safely. Happy to report that they went off very well, and we're pleased with the outcome, so we expect that to continue. Here's a rendering of the racetrack area that shows the new connection ramps to Paisano and also how Donovan and McNutt roads tie in. I should mention that we'll actually also open the McNutt road connection. It would be another alternative route to the east for traveling public. Another rendering looking back towards the west, just to show how the Donovan splits into an eastbound and a westbound, and then the Loop 375 main lanes running right through the middle. This is the Executive Center. This is what Executive Center's interchange is going to look like. I believe it's the first what's known as a SPUI intersection in the city of El Paso, which is a single point urban interchange. Kind of a neat concept that we've used on multiple jobs all over the state of Texas and other parts of the country. So kind of exciting to see how the roadway will actually cut underneath.
Can you explain that term? Does it mean going underneath? Is that the...
Yeah, well, it has to do with how the ramp intersections tie in up at the top. You know, normally you see a straight tie-in, and then you can make left and right-hand turn movements. This single-point urban interchange, they kind of come in at a little bit more of an angle to help alleviate traffic turning movements, help make it easier to do that. It's kind of a neat design, honestly. Been involved with one of them in a different project in a different part of the country, but we think it's a better, more efficient way to have that intersection operate.
What is the road that is on the far right? What is that?
Far right. That is the wastewater treatment plant access road.
That's just the access road. Okay.
Yeah. So what it does, and you can't see it on the picture, but it actually comes down and it cuts underneath the main lines of 375.
Are there
back
changes
to
being made to that? Were there changes being made to that? Because I know there's a lot of work going on in Executive Center.
Yeah.
right now.
No, that particular traffic movement, I believe, is the same as it was. It's just we're making it a little bit wider, probably.
Okay.
Yeah. These are some pictures of some of the more recent work. Up in the upper left is some of the utility relocation work I spoke about. We've got some of the substructure in the lower left at Racetrack going in place, where there's a large amount of walls and different things there. The upper right is the Spur 1966 bridge in the background, and then our bridge substructure where we will tie into that bridge, make an intersection up there. And then the lower picture shows some of the retaining wall work that's happening over in the old CMEX area. I'm actually happy to report today, too, that we're actually setting a large number of bridge girders in that area starting today for the next 5 days, which opens up a lot of work for us and our construction workforce in the next couple of months. So big milestone for the job happening today. Work Area 3 is from Spur 1966 to the Paseo del Norte Bridge. It's basically a 7,000-foot long bridge structure that runs along the Rio Grande floodplain on the south side of the border fence. We actually cross over the fence just right there at just past Spur 1966. Some major accomplishments in this area is we were able to gain access and right of entry from the IBWC and the railroads, which was a tremendous milestone on the job. This work area has upwards of 30% of the remaining man hours to build on the job. So getting that work opened up is considerably huge towards us meeting our construction completion date. We also built a lot of safe access down that roadway to help with CBP. You know, they've got a huge commitment there to patrol that area, and we had to make sure that we accommodated them accordingly. So we spent some extra money up front to help with making sure they had a good access in the area and also to help with facilitating the construction. We were able to start drilled shaft construction in August and also the bridge substructure construction. So coming up this next year, we've got a huge emphasis on completing the drilled shaft foundations and our substructure work. We've also got some major utility relocations in that area. There's a 24-inch sanitary sewer line that needs to get moved. We've got to accommodate the CBP electrical power to make sure that they keep their lights powered up at the whole time during construction. So we're coordinating closely with them and with El Paso Electric on making that happen. And we've also got to get started on some track relocation work in that area. There's a major Burlington Northern spur that needs to get moved that will allow the sewer line to get moved, which will allow the bridge construction to occur. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of coordination that happens in that area. This is a rendering of the actual bridge looking back towards the east, where it parallels I-10, and you can see the Union Pacific Railroad tracks right in the middle. Looking back towards the west, this is where we come back down and tie into the existing Loop 375 at the Paseo Dornete Bridge. And so here's some of the recent photos from our work in that area. The two pictures on the left are update photos of our drilled shaft foundations work, and on the right is some of our recent column substructure work that's gone up in the area. So I'm sure that the view from the other side of the river looks a little different starting today with the columns going in the air. Once you start seeing that, it usually tends to make you wonder what's getting built over there. Last work areas is work area 4, which is our downtown reconstruction area. Mainly involves just reconstructing Loop 375 to accommodate the new alignment and corresponding city street improvements. Some major accomplishments on this project is we're all but done with the design in the area, which is good. We've had a lot of coordination with the city of El Paso and also the streetcar project to make sure that we tie in correctly and that we coordinate and we don't have issues with our construction limits. And we'll get started getting some traffic control and detour work in place, and you'll probably start seeing the beginning of some removals and roadwork construction in 2017. I think we plan on starting that work in the spring. Right now we tend to focus on work areas 2 and 3 just because we need to get our Donovan and McNutt areas open and all that. So hasn't been a lot of work down here in the downtown area on the job as of yet, but next year that'll change. This is a rendering of Loop 375. I believe that's the Stanton Street Bridge in the background of the picture. And I wish I had some progress photos for you for this one, but we haven't started construction in this area yet. But with that, that's all the pictures and everything that I have. I appreciate being able to address you for the short amount of time this morning, and if there's any questions, we would try to answer them to the best of our ability. So.
Thank you, Mr. Good. Mr. Wardy.
Are we on schedule?
We are on schedule with our, we've partnered with TxDOT to keep our construction completion date in place. We're working through a lot of third-party issues that have affected us in our design and progress. We've been working diligently as a team to try to minimize any kind of delays to the job. I tell you, we've actually done some acceleration in some areas to help bring our completion date closer to the original completion date that was in 2017. But as far as our revised, we have a revised completion date. We are on schedule with that date.
What is that revised completion?
That date is August of 2018.
Okay, and the original was what, Mr. Tibbs?
I'm sorry, I don't remember that.
I believe it
off
was
the top of my head.
October of 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're really not that far behind.
No, we're actually, and like I said, we've made a lot of progress with the railroads and the third parties that are stakeholders in the job. There's been a lot of coordination between TxDOT, us, and those entities to get those dates in place, and we feel confident that that's going to be achievable for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, I think the public will be very excited about the opening of Paisano and Donovan and McNutt. I think that'll help relieve some of this congestion that we're all experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, item number 5, update, discussion, and action on the RMA board motion of December 2nd, 2016 regarding A, the investigation of RMA policy process changes for protection of the RMA assets, and B, ongoing coordination with the City of El Paso on potential policy and process changes for oversight of RMA funds. Mr. Tejas.
Thank you. Ray Mateus, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. So today I have for you, as read into the record here as number 5, really an update as it relates to the misdirection of funds related to the streetcar project. And so that's really what we're going to be talking about. It's really an update. I thought what we would do is start with the various motions. The motion that this board passed on December 1st, subsequent to that, and these are just the most recent motions, of course. Subsequent to that, the City Council took action on December 6th. I want to talk a little bit about the financial operations of the RMA because that has come into question recently in terms of there's some confusion about how the RMA works. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit and then go into the subsequent and ongoing efforts. And really this is intended to brief you on where we are, where we're headed, and more importantly to solicit input from the board in terms of whether you feel that these directions are appropriate or if you'd like us to look in other areas as well. So please stop me as we go along. So this was the board motion of the RMA on December, that should be the 1st. My apologies for that. First item that the board approved was expressing full faith and confidence in the staff and the City of El Paso fiscal agent. That was really important, very well received by the City of El Paso because it reinforced the underlying concept of the cooperation between the City of El Paso and the Regional Mobility Authority. So that's a very important point, and I'm glad you all made that motion. Second one was to direct the staff to work with the city on the ongoing investigation and to maximize our chances of recovery. And we're going to talk in specific about items 2, 3, and 4 with the underlying principle of number 1 running throughout the entire presentation. Excuse me. So number 3, then, you directed staff to investigate changes to policies and procedures to assure the protection of the RMA's assets. And lastly, you asked to continue ongoing discussions with city staff to improve relative roles and responsibilities for the financial oversight of the RMA fund. So those are the 4 guiding principles that we are working by. Council then followed up with their own motion on December 6th with 3 parts as well. The first was a request for a third-party or outside consultant review of financial policies and procedures involved in the city and RMA relationship. They also requested that the RMA board reevaluate the executive director's employment contract, which has a provision that states that the executive director would report directly to the chair. They'd like to see that instead the RMA executive director report to the full board. And third item was to review and clearly define all roles and responsibilities of the fiscal agent and trustees' roles and the parties in such roles. And that's where I'll touch on here in a moment. Throughout that entire conversation that the City Council had, in the end they wanted to see any corrections, modifications, improvements memorialized within the management agreement, between the existing management agreement amended to include those improvements on an ongoing basis. So that takes us into the RMA's financial operations, and this was there was a bit of confusion on this one in terms of how the city manages its funds. So that first note there, you'll notice the City of El Paso, they manage all of our funds except for the specific debt issuances that you see below. So that means any project funds that we receive go currently into the city's concentration account, and they're managed by the City of El Paso. That includes bike share revenues, Cesar Chavez, all of the activities that the RMA is involved in. except for, as noted, specific debt issuances, and it's those four that you see below. So for Border West Expressway, the project that was just outlined here a moment ago by Mr. Gum, those funds, the $500 million, was actually put into a trust account, and Bank of Texas serves as a trustee for that specific account. And that's a trust agreement between, a tri-party agreement between TxDOT, the Regional Mobility Authority, and the Bank of Texas. So anything related to the expenditure of funds associated with the Border West Expressway, to which to date we've made expenditures in excess of $205 million, all of those activities have been routed through Bank of Texas, not through the City of El Paso. Now, having said that, I will also mention that because the city serves as the fiscal agent for the RMA and for auditing purposes, we also have the City of El Paso record those transactions once they've occurred. So we provide that information on a monthly basis to the City of El Paso. In fact, city staff has access to all of the monthly statements that we receive from Bank of Texas, and that goes not only for Bank of Texas, but all of these other debt issuances as well. So city staff receives those statements, and they make recommendations as appropriate, so that once the annual auditors come in, the annual audit happens, the annual auditors actually come in and they see all of our transactions in one location, and that is the City of El Paso. So I hope that makes sense, right? The City of El Paso does not manage the funds, but they record those transactions for us. Wells Fargo then serves as a trustee on the State Spur 601 bonds, and that was a bond issuance of about a little over $233 million. So again, any and all transactions associated with the inner loop, those payments and expenditures are made by Wells Fargo on the RMA's behalf. Wells Fargo also serves as the paying agent on the Americas Interchange State Infrastructure Bank, which was packaged as a Build America bond. And that one is a little bit unique because it is a Build America bond, which in essence, when you really boil it down, what it amounts to is that there is a federal subsidy involved with Build America bond programs. So that what that means really is that there is a percentage, say, for example, if you had interest due in any particular year of $100,000, 35% of that interest is rebated back to you by the federal government. That federal subsidy then, we agreed in our Americas Interchange deal, we agreed with the City of El Paso that federal subsidy would be split in half. Half of it would go towards paying down the debt. The other half would come to the RMA for operational expenses. So that's why we have a paying agent for that particular one, because it is unique. It has that federal subsidy. So Wells Fargo, as the paying agent, is tasked with identifying the annual subsidy that is required, requesting it of the federal government, receiving it from the federal government, dispersing half of it to the RMA as operating expenses, keeping the other half, and then going to the city and receiving the payment source, which is on this one, as you all will recall, the Transportation Reinvestment Zone revenues. And then they make the payment to the State Infrastructure Bank. So a little bit unique on that one. But again, the point is that all of those transactions are managed by Wells Fargo on our behalf. Then lastly, BNY Mellon serves as trustee for the 2013 vehicle registration fee bonds. This is, of course, the bond issuance that was put into place and that is repaid by County of El Paso vehicle registration fee proceeds. So all of the projects, and we're going to speak about several of them here coming up on item number 6, all of the expenses, whether it's engineering, construction, or even RMA administrative expenses, all of those that are paid out are paid by BNY Mellon. They do not come through the City of El Paso's system. But again, just as with all the others, the city actually records those transactions for us. And then the last item there is the proposed second VRF, vehicle registration fee bond issuance, that is proposed for 2017 that we are working on. So in a nutshell, that's how it works.
So, Mr.
Yes, sir.
May I ask a
Certainly.
question? So the City of El Paso is not involved as our fiscal agent with any of those relationships?
None of those that are identified on the screen, with the sole exception of recording the transactions once they've been completed by the individual other trustees.
Well, I guess the question, not to put you on the spot, Raymond, but why would we do it that way? Because that, as a result of what we've gone through here, wouldn't it make sense since the city acts as our fiscal agent, that they be involved in the management of all the funds that come through the RMA? I mean, there's only one of you.
Sure.
You get hit by a car tomorrow, I don't think anybody here is qualified to do any of this. Or I may be speaking out of turn, but I think everybody understands the point that I'm making.
Certainly. So the reason that this structure was put into place is that these are unique bond transactions, so they're separated out with a trustee relationship. And that's not an uncommon situation. In fact, a lot of governmental agencies utilize trustee relationships. Now, recognizing, though, that a lot of governmental bodies have their own CFO and their own financial divisions, they're able to manage that sort of thing. We don't. So our intention was to keep our bond funds segregated from our operating funds, which in essence you can really kind of see it like that. The city manages all of our operational funds and some of the projects that are involved. But then the bond proceeds, all of these are bonds. You'll notice all of the bond proceeds go through paying agents or trustees. I don't know if I answered that question, though.
No, not really. Okay, well, the point I'm trying to make is I understand exactly what you're saying, but you alluded to my point. Since we do not have a CFO or a controller, and we have a small staff, wouldn't it be prudent for the city of El Paso, because they pay a lot of bonds also, to manage these for us instead of you having to directly manage them?
I see. So what you're suggesting is not removing the trustee relationship.
That's correct.
That the city would oversee the management. I see. We can certainly look at that. In fact, actually, that's part of the reason we're having this conversation today, to see what other areas you'd like me to investigate.
I think it creates a check and balance, and it just makes the city understand. And I can understand where some members of council commented, well, if we're the fiscal agent, it's kind of like, are we going to do it or not? Or are we just going to handle a little piece and you do the other? So I don't think it's a pushback from the council, but I think it's prudent financial management that if they are a fiscal agent, that they are a fiscal agent in all matters, and that they are included in this relationship as somehow defined in our agreement with them.
Okay.
So that they are fully aware of any and all transactions other than just recording them. I think that makes some people maybe a little bit nervous. No disrespect
No,
intended
none
to
taken.
you.
Of course not. No, absolutely. This should be an open conversation, and please feel free to do that. So I think what I'm hearing, though, then is really what you're talking about is when a payment request comes in from an engineering firm, by way of example, that would be routed through the city. The city would then actually make the request to the trustee on behalf of the RMA?
Yes,
Okay.
so that we close the gap and allow the security issues in there because of what has occurred and the potential for that occurring again. Because I just think it's prudent financial management. I may be off in this area, but it's better to build the safeguards in there to give everybody peace of mind in this, and then the city be comfortable that they are, as our fiscal agent, totally involved in the process.
Okay. I can certainly add that to the list of items that we're evaluating.
And through the chair, if I can expand on that, I agree with those comments. But I think, in a sense, we need a CFO, and that's the city role, and we need to see that face in a quarterly briefing, I think, by the city telling us what's going on, not just through you. I think our CFO, in effect, should be making a presentation quarterly.
Well, and we'll touch on that
That's included.
here in a moment, because I think it looks like we're heading in that direction.
All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other question? Okay.
Okay, so the next couple of slides really delves into what has been happening in the last couple of weeks. I mean, it'll touch on Mr. Niemer's point as well. So there have been staff discussions, RMA staff discussions with the city. I've met specifically with the chief financial officer right after the last RMA board meeting was December 1st, Friday. I met with the chief financial officer on that Monday. We began the process to identify potential areas of improvements, and these are some of the areas that we've begun looking into. One of the main ones that the CFO wanted to look at was they wanted to examine the RMA's interaction with city staff, and specifically they were curious, or they wanted to focus in on how does city staff at each of the differing levels, whether it's vendor management division or the financial services division, how do they interact with me specifically as the RMA employee, and how does that look compared to if I were part of a city department? They wanted to match those up and make sure that that we're tracking as closely as possible to the way that a city department is treated. So that was a direction that was given by the CFO to all of his sub-department heads to figure out how the RMA interacts, and more importantly, identify those areas where we're being treated differently, and make sure that, well, really to figure out why we're treated differently and should that continue. So that was a big one. Another one that needs to happen, I think, is the clarification of the RMA and the city's roles in the vendor management process. I think that was an area that was exposed in this incident. So that's a very important role that we have to define for each other. Those two roles. Another area that the city was particularly interested in is how do you deal with an agency of a single employee, and what does that look like? And that touches, I believe, on what Mr. Wardy was just talking about right now. How can you build an agency with a single employee, and frankly, we're going to talk about in the next slide, does a single employee even make sense anymore? This agency has grown tremendously since 2008 when I came on as the initial employee, so maybe it's time to reevaluate that in and of itself. But then outside of that, the city is also looking at how do you deal with an agency with a single employee? So that, I think, is an important area to explore as well. These next two items we've been working on with the city for some time. The first one there you see is to shift all of the RMA funds from the city's concentration account to separate CRRMA bank accounts. Now, the city in fiscal year 16 created separate bank accounts for us with the intention of lifting all of those funds that we have in the city's concentration account, picking them up and dropping them into separate accounts. That has not happened just yet, but I believe we're heading in that direction. That was another point that we discussed with the CFO recently. And then lastly, the development of quarterly financial reports from the city, and this touches directly on Mr. Niemer's point, which is we do not have a CFO, and so you are not receiving the quarterly reports that you ought to be. But we've been in discussions with the city on that one, and it looks like we're heading in that direction here very soon. So these are the areas that I touched on with the CFO last Monday. Additional discussions that have occurred. I've had a call with the internal auditor. We discussed several documents that he had questions about, requesting additional documentation, that sort of thing. So this goes back to that point of working with the city to maximize our recovery efforts. We've been in conversation since then, and hopefully we'll continue as well. City's IT, it came up during the conversation with the auditor that the city has provided support to city staff related to IT and email security issues. So I've been in contact with the IT personnel on that matter as well. And then lastly, the city attorney's office, our attorney Brian Cassidy has been in conversation with the city attorney's office for quite some time, but more specifically very recently in various matters, specifically the ongoing investigations, the open records requests that we've each received recently, and the recovery efforts. So the point of this slide is really to talk about how not only are we talking about the financial operations of the RMA along with the city and our relationship with the city, we're talking about all aspects of our relationship with the city. So I think that is a very good step forward for each of our agencies. These are additional areas that I've been looking at from the RMA side. And again, it's really important. The point of this presentation is really to solicit input from the board to determine whether I'm headed in the right direction or if you'd like to see me go a different way. So one of the things I've been looking at is the evaluation of the current responsibilities of the executive director and the possibility of hiring an employee with financial expertise to oversee and manage the RMA finances. There is a similarly situated regional mobility authority in Texas that has an executive director and has a CFO, and that's the extent of their employees. So I'll be speaking with them, looking at the list of duties required of that CFO, and seeing if we can't make something like that work here. And of course, this is something that won't go any further without obviously the support of the board. But we've discussed this in very general terms at the last during the last budget cycle. But that's something that I think was highlighted in this incident. So it's back on the table. We're looking at it in great detail. That second item there was at the request of the City of El Paso to look at the employment agreement to have the executive director report to the full RMA board. So that's in there as well. I'm looking at evaluating the best financial practices for other similarly situated small governmental bodies, whether it's RMAs or COGS or other entities that are similar to the structure of a regional mobility authority. And then lastly, I'm looking for ways to participate in periodic training as it relates to financial and IT security efforts. So those are the efforts that we've been involved in since the last two meetings, the meeting of the RMA board on the 1st and the City Council on the 6th. This was not intended to be all-inclusive. It was intended really to give you a snapshot of where we are today and where we're headed. So with that, I'd ask for any additional direction from the board, or questions, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Tejas. I appreciate that update. I think that's very helpful. I mean, I think this gives us an opportunity as a board to step back and reevaluate our policies and procedures. After being in business for 9 years, it's a good time to reflect on where we've been. We've grown. We do very complicated projects. So as we move forward, I would ask that in the case of governance issue, have a chance to review our bylaws. So I'd like to ask Mr. Fernandez to convene the governance committee to review our bylaws. And just to step back, we may not make any changes, but I think it's a good time to look at that and review them again, because I don't think any changes have been made since the inception of the organization. And I'll also ask our treasurer, Mr. Parker, to coordinate and have the finance committee maybe oversee this process that we're going through right now, come back and then make recommendations to the full board. At any point in time, we can bring it to the board for discussion. But I think it'll be positive for the finance committee to walk through those types of internal controls that are being considered and evaluate, as Mr. Wardy indicated, how are we structured, and is this the right structure? So I think best practices is a very good idea, and it's a good time for us to be able to step back and look at our organization and reevaluate where we are.
Yes, ma'am. So I will work with each of the committee chairs and divvy up the action items that we're looking at and route them to the individual committee.
I think so. I mean, I think that gives them an opportunity to sit down and go through in great detail and be able to have discussion. Any board member can attend any of those meetings, so I would ask that you
Yes, ma'am.
Advise all the board members when those meetings occur. So there's if you want to participate in that, you have that opportunity to participate. But then I think as we look at our governance, we have a finance committee, and that, to me, that certainly fits into that, and have Mr. Parker be able to head that up, and members of that committee review the process as well.
Certainly. I'll do that. So this was intended to be a briefing. No action is required.
Madam Chairman, one question. Aside from RMA matters, has the City of El Paso changed the way they handle payments and requests and so forth?
Yes, sir. Right after the incident, I understand that they made certain revisions, and in fact, we're seeing one of our vendors wanted to change their address, so they're going through the revised procedures, and it is a little more onerous, definitely.
That's a good thing.
But
Yes,
it's important.
definitely.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Parker.
Mr. Tejas, the City of El Paso actually operates the IT system that we use. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We use their servers, their email accounts. Yes, sir.
And I'm not trying to throw stones at their IT system. I think it's quite good. But I just wonder if you would happen to know if they engage in regular and irregular penetration testing of that system?
I don't know, but I can find that out. I'll add that to the list of
I would
items to
be
discuss.
very interested in your doing that, because they may have well had some experience with that.
Yes, sir. I'll look into that.
Any other questions for Mr. Tejas? Comments? Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Tejas.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll move on to item number 6, discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing the chair or executive director to execute the following instruments as they relate to projects from the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. A, First Amendment to the interlocal agreement with the County of El Paso for the Darrington Roadway Improvement Project. B, Second Amendment to the interlocal agreement with the County of El Paso for the Vista del Sol Roadway Improvement Project. C, First Amendment to the interlocal agreement with the County of El Paso for the East Lake Boulevard Phase 1 Roadway Improvement Project. And D, Second Amendment to Work Authorization Number 1 with Dannenbaum Engineering Company, El Paso LLC for the East Lake Boulevard Phase 1 project. Mr. Tejas.
Okay, thank you. So I have another PowerPoint for you on this one, and this one you should begin to recognize. This is what I'll be using going forward, subject to your request for improvement, of course. This is the Comprehensive Mobility Plan map. That shows all of the projects that we're involved in. This is a description of each of them. The highlighted ones, East Lake 1, Vista del Sol, and Darrington Road, those are the three individual projects that are before you under item 6 of the agenda. The rest are moving along. This, I'm open to suggestions on this one in terms of presentation. It is a little difficult to see, but again, as I discussed with you all at the last board meeting, this is a graphic representation of how the contractual structure works between us and the county and each of the design firms and the construction entities. So you see up there on the top box, those are the agreements that actually authorized or actually put into place the vehicle registration fee that the county implemented and then authorized the RMA to go out and issue debt off of that vehicle registration fee bond, vehicle registration fee. Then that second line, and I should note, within that original agreement, the county required the RMA to go back to the county with individual project development agreements before we entered into any design or construction activity. So that second line there, the second row, shows you each of the project development agreements that we have. Those are interlocal agreements between the RMA and the County of El Paso. You'll see in yellow, hopefully you can see that, the Vista del Sol, East Lake 1, and Darrington project are each being revised. Originally, they were drafted to allow us to complete design work. They are being amended today, subject to your approval, to allow us to move into the construction phase for each of those three projects, Vista del Sol, East Lake 1, and Darrington. That next row then shows you the design services agreements that we have in place with each of our designers. You'll notice there under East Lake 1, the Dannenbaum engineering firm, there is an amendment here as item 6D that you see highlighted there. And I'm going to touch on each of these here in a moment. I just wanted to lay out the structure for you. So that shows you each of the engineering firms that we've engaged. And then lastly, the final row shows you the construction activities. So those are the contracts that we have with the construction contractors. You'll see 3 of those highlighted. Those are the 3 that we're amending today, which the interlocal amendments with the County of El Paso is now authorizing us to move to the construction phase and allocating specific funds for each of those. So let me get into the detail now that you've seen the structure. What we're really looking to do here, items A, B, and C are all amending the interlocal agreements with the County of El Paso to allow us to move from the design phase into the construction phase. The first one there, Darrington, actually allocates $5 million from the vehicle registration fee bond proceeds, allows the RMA to move into the construction phase for Darrington. Under B, Vista del Sol does the same thing. It authorizes the RMA to move into the construction phase and also allocates $3 million for those construction activities. And item C then is East Lake Boulevard Phase 1. It authorizes the RMA to move into construction phase and also allocates $35 million for construction activities associated with that project. Now, D is a little bit different because, as I mentioned before, D is actually an amendment to the design services agreement that we have with Dannenbaum Engineering. And that adds an additional $26,511, and you'll see all of that in your backup. That additional $26,000 is for irrigation, water meter connections, and utility coordination. That request has been reviewed and approved by the county, and in fact, the interlocal for East Lake has sufficient funding to account for that. So that is what I have for you today. We also have David Head, who's managing this program for us from our general engineering consultant team, should you have any specific questions about the projects or the tasks being requested here today.
Any questions? We can take this all in one
You
motion?
could, certainly.
Any discussion or questions for Mr. Head or Mr. Tez?
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I have a question.
Okay.
All right.
Why is it a motion to, why did the board resolution authorize the chair or executive director to execute?
Certainly, good question. So the chair is being authorized to execute the interlocal agreements, and that's because those interlocal agreements are executed by the judge, the county judge, whereas the work authorization is executed by an engineering firm, and I sign those.
All right.
Incidentally, the county worked on these as well, the county attorney's office, so I'm not sure if you're intending to abstain from these items as well.
Oh, I should abstain. I will abstain.
Okay. Did we get an approval for the last motion? I guess we, well, I'll ask again. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
And we'll note that Mr. Niemer is abstaining to this. And any
Thank you.
opposed? Okay, so I think we're...
Thank you.
So item number six has been approved. Okay, item number 7, presentation, discussion, and action on a board resolution authorizing the following change orders to the construction contract with the Paso del Norte Track Works as they relate to the El Paso streetcar project. A, change order number 6, Stanton Street Corridor realignment activities, including track and station relocation, underground water and sanitary sewer work, and the addition of a bi-directional cycle track. B, change order number 7, additional storm sewer and pavement improvements within the Central Business District, Phase 4 project limits. And C, change order number 8, miscellaneous additional work related to the project's maintenance and storage facility, overhead contact system foundations, irrigation systems, and stamped concrete pavement and crosswalks. Mr. Tejas.
Thank you. So we have with us today Gil Gardner, who is the construction manager from our general engineering consultant team, and he's here to present the details of each of these change orders. However, I wanted to give you a brief overview before I turn it over to Mr. Gardner. There are, as you know, read into the record, 3 specific change orders that are being requested. I want to touch on change order 7 and 8 first. 7 deals with the Central Business District Phase 4 project that the City of El Paso has. As you'll recall, the original agreement with our construction contractor called out several base bids. Base bid 1 was all of the work that we needed to get done in order to operate the system. Base bids 2 and 3 were additional activities that were requested by the water utility and are being funded by the water utility. And base bid 4 were additional improvements requested by the city for their project identified as a Central Business District 4 project. So what you see before you as change order number 7 are additional storm, water, sewer, and pavement changes within the project limits of the Central Business District 4 project, and they will be funded by 2 funding sources, partially by the remaining contingency fund that we had set aside for the City of El Paso's Central Business District Phase 4 project, and the remainder to be provided by the City of El Paso through an additional infusion of funds of $375,000. So that specific change order number 7 is being requested and funded by the City of El Paso. Item C, then, that's more of a catch-all than anything else. That's a whole slew of different changes that are required throughout the project, and Mr. Gardner will identify those. The funding source for that are the contingency funds from the project. So that leads us to item 7A, which is Stanton Street. We touched on this, if you'll recall, I want to say it was 2 to 3 months ago when we had our last change order, item number 5, which had certain utility revisions. We referenced the fact that we were going to be back with certain changes along Stanton, so that's how we got here today. And just to touch very briefly on what this is, and this is important because we had a special open house this past Monday. It was very well attended at UTEP. And we did that because we were getting ready to begin construction activities on Stanton. And specifically, we're starting on January 2nd, I should mention. We will begin trenching from Baltimore all the way down to Cliff. So it's a nice long stretch of Stanton. So we felt it was important to let the community know about that, but also to explain to them what we were doing. And that's really what this change order number 6 is about. When we were reviewing and preparing to do the construction activities for the Stanton corridor, we partnered with the City of El Paso and we looked at a more efficient way of doing the project. And what we came out with, after a lot of engagement and discussion with the City of El Paso, was a realignment of the track. The track was originally scheduled to be on the east side of the roadway heading northbound. We've since moved it to the center, and what that does is a couple of things. It actually moves it away from existing utility lines that we were prepared to relocate, but instead of relocating those telecommunication lines, we left those in place. We moved into the center and avoided all of those expenses of relocation. And then we actually were able to work with the City of El Paso to reserve a lot of the parking, especially on the west side of Stanton, and add a bidirectional cycle track. So this flows directly into the City of El Paso's bike plan that they've been developing. This is the first, I believe it's the first bidirectional cycle track that the city will have, and we're going to run it all the way from Baltimore down to Arizona, is my belief. So in the end, this was a coordinated effort with the City of El Paso that I think in the end is going to be a very big positive step forward for the community. So that, in a nutshell, is what these. Oh, and I should mention also, because we moved the expenses that you'll see outlined for change order number 6, because we moved the track away from the underground utilities, we've actually saved quite a bit of money from the relocation, and really, in the end, we're about at a wash. But so that's an important note. I would mention, this is being identified as a change order because technically it is a change order. It is a change from what was bid, but it's a little bit different than a normal change order in that this is not necessarily an unforeseen. This was a change an owner-initiated change where we saw benefit for the public. So it's a little bit different than what you would normally see in terms of a change order. Anyhow, do you have any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Gardner for the specifics?
Mr. Test, did you say we're not going to lose any parking along that route all the way from Baltimore to Cliff?
No, ma'am. We were able
Okay.
to we were able to save a great deal of parking. However, by moving it into the center, we are moving also the overhead contact system poles, the poles that will hold the power lines. And you'll see, in fact, when you drive Stanton today, you'll see foundations that are actually in the roadway. So you'll have bump outs for those. In certain areas, we're actually extending the sidewalk a little bit. So there are definitely parking impacts. I don't mean to say that there aren't any, but we were able, through this realignment, to save quite a bit of parking.
And the cycle track wasn't in the original, but so we're able to incorporate that as well.
That's completely new. It was a new addition.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wardy?
So the cumulative effect of the change order is 2.2 million,
Yes, sir.
up or down?
So that is a good question that I don't have the answer off the top of my head. What we could do is we could come back and do a full briefing on the project. What I can tell you is that it's in essence a wash between the original expenditures that were planned and what is actually being put into place now.
See, I'm not an engineer, but that's very confusing to me. We're not going to be digging anything up, but yet we're going to spend, are you telling me we're still going to spend an additional $2 million?
Not additional. So this change order changes, let me see how I can explain
Well, you
this.
said your slide says the cumulative effect of this change order to the project budget is 2.2 million.
Correct.
Up or down?
So we had budgeted over $3 million for the Stanton corridor. So and that's what I was trying to say earlier in terms of this not being a true change order. We'd budgeted $3 million for the corridor. Of that $3 million, we're spending over $2 million for this specific activity. So in other words, the $3 million that we had originally planned for included telecommunication relocations and that sort of thing. We're actually removing all of that scope of work and that cost and replacing it with this. So I hope that's helpful. Is that?
Okay.
So you're saying it's a wash, so
In essence,
Is that-
right? Because when you couple the 2.2 million with the prior change order that we did at the last board meeting, you're in excess of $3 million. But the $3 million is inclusive of not only the utility changes but also the civil work as well. So what I'd like to do is come back to you with a full briefing of the financial. I think the upper level point is we're well within budget. The expenditures that we're proposing today are well within what we had planned for. It's just a shifting of activities that we were planning. So that's in a nutshell what it means, but I'd like to get you the specific details by line item, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
And I apologize. I should have done that.
No,
for
that's
you.
all right. I think in blue, you think in gray, so that's all right a little bit.
Yes, sir. So I will get that to the board.
Madam Chairman?
yes, Mr. Niemer.
A question. First, this seems like a huge change, moving the streetcar tracks from the side of the road to the middle. And I have to confess, I feel a sense of heartburn when I think about it, just because I'm trying to visualize how all this is going to work and so forth. And it seems like a sudden change. What is the procedure? And let me back up. About 2 months ago, we had a telecommunications relocation for about $600,000, I recall, and we deferred that. Is that one of the ones we're avoiding? That's one of the expenses we avoid by moving to the center?
No, sir. And that will actually be back to you hopefully in January. That was an item that was sent back. No, ultimately, that $600,000, that's for the Father Rom area mainly and some other areas, but that deals with different utilities.
All right. Well, tell me about the procedure, because seems like it's happened very quickly.
Well, we've been working with the city for quite some time. We've briefed the board, and granted, not in any great detail like we're going to do today,
Right.
but we have briefed the board along the way. I want to say we've been working with the city for at least 3 months,
Yeah.
3-4 months,
I
I'd
think
say.
that's right.
I can get you a date.
No, that's all right. That's all right. It was just...
Well, but I
was
don't
a
want to
little
leave you with that
surprised to
impression that we figured this out yesterday and we're presenting it to you.
Right.
'Cause this has been in the works for quite some time.
Okay.
And again, the city's been heavily involved since the
And
beginning.
they've done their studies, and it looks like a great way to do things.
In fact, actually, it's been a really good partnership on this particular corridor for a couple of reasons. As you know, the city of El Paso is developing their master bike plan, and they have a preeminent bike planning consultant by the name of Alta. When we developed our initial plan and we talked about the cycle track and that sort of thing, we sent them our plans. Alta reviewed them, made certain tweaks and improvements, and we incorporated those into our plan. So the city, as far as everyone that I've spoken to, the city is very pleased with the cycle track, how it was developed and how it's being placed. Outside of that, we worked with Khalil, the Public Works Director, with Ted Marquez, he's been involved. So we've plugged everybody in that we believe needs to. Of course, Sun Metro is heavily involved, and they're in every weekly construction meeting we have. So quite a bit of coordination has gone into this.
Mr. Tez, it was related to budget. This is not why we're changing this design, because of the cost of moving the utilities.
This is definitely a more efficient approach to the Stanton corridor, absolutely.
Any other questions?
Okay.
I
Well,
do.
yes, sir.
Okay, just from a safety consideration, so if you're moving the tracks to the middle of the road,
Yes, sir.
so tell me how people are going to step out and get on in the middle of Stanton.
I've gotten
with
that.
traffic. That is
Absolutely.
a busy street.
Yes, sir.
So how do we plan to address
Do
that?
we have any, does Mr. Gardner have any
There is
visuals
one in
that we
here.
can see?
I'm not sure. Well, let me see if that can help. There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So what you see here, the orange. This is Stanton on the right hand side. I had mentioned the streets. This was an early version, and the street naming is a little bit off. We've got an updated one that's being worked on right now, so don't focus too much on the street names. It's really just, let me see if I can work this. So these are...
Mr. Tiz, I'm having a little technical problem here. I'm stuck on a slide from the comprehensive mobility plan.
And the street.
Empty it, and you'll see it in the...
Here, I'll let you do it for me.
I'm a Luddite. You asked me to do it. It's in Russian. Oh, go ahead.
Everyone else is okay?
Yes.
Presentations.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
So what you're seeing here then is on the right-hand side of the screen is Baltimore, and you're heading south going to the left down to Schuster. So the orange lanes there you see are southbound vehicles. Above that in blue, those are the parking areas that are being retained. The red is the actual track itself, so you see the vehicle. Plus, incidentally, I would mention in the vehicle lane, you'll also in certain areas have bidirectional turn lanes in there as well, so vehicles will be able to turn left from that lane or right as well. And remember, the vehicle goes with traffic. It is not a streetcar-only lane, so that is permitted. The green lane then is northbound traffic, and then just below that to the west, the east, then because of the layout in blue, that's the bidirectional cycle track. In fact, one of the recommendations that Alta made was to shift it. We had the bike lane up on the west side, but in truth, all of the residents are actually on the east side, so we moved it at their request. But anyhow, so that's the layout from Schuster all the way up to Baltimore. Your question specifically is about the stations. So the way that this works, let me see if I can get this to work. So this isn't very clean, but this is supposed to be a crosswalk. The way that it will work is that individuals will use the crosswalk.
It's only up on the screen there. We don't have it on our...
Oh,
deal
I'm
here,
sorry.
so-
Okay, if you
That's all right.
have a look at these screens up here,
Yeah.
the yellow is supposed to be a crosswalk. So what happens is you'll have the station either on the near side or the far side. And let me show you the far side. So this would be a far side. So the individuals would use the crosswalk to get to the station, which is placed in the center of the street. Now, this is not a new approach. In fact, the city of El Paso had these alignments when they were originally running back in the 70s. We've got tons of photos showing individuals crossing the street and heading into the stations, which were located in the center of
Yeah,
the
but
street.
you didn't have the traffic that you have today, so I'm a little concerned about, I'm just making a point. I'm not.
Certainly, but it's not unique to El Paso either. I mean, there are
Okay.
many, many communities that have this type of approach. So safety has been evaluated. In fact, Streets and Maintenance, Mr. Ted Marquez, ran traffic numbers, and they all got comfortable with this approach before we could even take it any further. So the very first step of the coordination of this effort was to talk to Streets and Maintenance and say, and in particular, we were worried about Schuster. How are we going to deal with that if we neck it down to a single lane? We were able to figure out a way to get 2 lanes down there because there's a lot of left turning movements heading southbound. So they've looked at traffic numbers there. They've looked at traffic numbers all the way across. Incidentally, as part of our open house meeting on this past Monday, we actually had a joint meeting with the City of El Paso, who is developing a project by the name of Sun City Lights, I believe, that has several components that identify major corridors in the area for improvements. One of them is at Cincinnati. I forget the name of that particular one, but that one will actually have traffic calming devices and improvements as well, including around the corner here, just past Baltimore heading north, you're going to have angled parking, which will have traffic calming effect. So you're slowing traffic as you head into these areas as well. But anyhow, to answer your point, that was coordinated with the city very closely since the very beginning. But this is
May I?
procedurally how it would work.
Question.
Mrs. Reyes.
The crosswalks, and will they be lit at night? You know, at El Paso High, they have the crosswalks that flash,
Yes, ma'am.
which I think helps.
Now, the only place...
Enhances safety, so.
Yes, ma'am. The only place, and Gil, correct me if I'm wrong, the only place where we have those planned is near Cathedral, where we actually do have the lights. I believe the rest of these are regular crosswalks.
Okay. I just think it would help and enhance safety, because it is a very, very busy street.
Yes, ma'am.
How many of these landings are going to be along that route?
Become less busy.
Do you know how many of these stations will
How many of the stations do we? 4, all of
I
between,
can go over, when I make my
Okay.
presentation, I'll go over that too. I think I can address your safety concerns because that was a big element.
right?
Why don't I get out of the way and turn it over to Mr. Gardner? Subject to your questions, I'll ask Mr. Gardner to come up and provide his presentation.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Tez.
Thank you.
Mr. Gardner?
I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, it's okay.
I'm Mr. Gardner. I've seen you before, and I think you've seen me. And I'd like to go through this presentation, the technical aspects of it, real quick, of the change orders. And as I go through it, I think I can address several of the questions that each of you might have. Hopefully, I don't anticipate the wrong question. The status of the project, just to give you an idea right now of the percent of completion of the project, including the proposed improvements we're doing right now, we're a total of about 46% complete of the project here. And we're basically almost out of the ground. As you can see, there's a lot of track work going on right here. Just to give you a thing, we're 41% complete of the civil track work in the MSF project. The wastewater removal and replacement is about 65% complete, which we'll finish up shortly. The potable water improvement, replacement, relocation, we're 79% complete. 85% on the CBD4 capital improvements, which we will finish up. Right now, we're outside. We're not in CBD4 because of the shopping season. We pulled out the day before Thanksgiving, and we'll come back in January and finish that up. The total infrastructure, as I said, we're roughly 46% complete. Let me go over the change orders now. As Mr. Tejas said, change order number 6 consists of the resolution of issues across the base bids, the very base bids 1, 2, and 3, and specifically addresses the Stanton corridor. The change order includes the adjustment of the bid quantities and additive changes to the work scope and contract price, primarily relative to the Stanton corridor. This is alignment that Mr. Tejas was talking about. This is the proposed new alignment where we've managed to put in a bike trail, working very, very closely with the city on the bike trail here to identify opportunities for to add this two-way bike trail in here, and we work closely with the city to do it. And in putting, one of the items that we were able to do was to address a safety issue as and this I'll show you in the traffic signalization portion of this, is that all of the stops, we have 4 stops along here that are impacted, and all of these stops are located at signalized intersections. The original design had one of the stops that wasn't at a signalized intersection and happened to be at Washington Street, which was not signalized, but it was along the curb. Now, Mr. Wardy brought up the fact about people, crossing in and getting into the stations. He's absolutely correct. That is an issue, and it is a safety issue, and we always like to put them where we have traffic signals that can control the traffic and allow for pedestrian crossings. And in a way, whether it's in the middle or whether it's on the curb, is the safety issue is still there, because if you put it along the curb, then you have people on the other side of the street who want to get to the streetcar stop, have to cross the street. So it still has to be signalized. So the fact, we feel confident that we've provided the necessary safety through the signaling, through the signal heads, the PED heads, to allow for adequate protection of the streetcar user, the pedestrian, because they're going to be using signalized pedestrian crossings at each of the stations. So the other changes that were along Stanton Street that we involved some of the system changes, which included rerouting the OCS poles and locations there to accommodate the bike trail and to accommodate, make certain we were able to accommodate parking. Some of the track realignment changes along here where we moved it from the side of the street to the center of the street, and make certain we do it in such a way that it doesn't interfere with traffic. By putting it in the center of the street, that's, you might say, the least used of it, and we actually, in a way, open up the curbside traffic, where before it was on the curbside, it was, even though it's mixed use, where cars and vehicles could ride on it, the cars tend to not drive on it unless absolutely necessary. By putting it in the street, we actually opened up that lane, plus added a bike trail. We had some stop modifications on Stanton Street, and a little later on I'll show you what the stops look like and what we've been able to do, and we've actually, I think we've provided some better stops in these 4 areas here. Underground water and sanitary sewer lines to make certain we protected it, and as we were going discovering, we discovered a couple of additional older sanitary sewer lines that needed to be replaced. And there was adequate budget in our contingency for the water and sewer to pay for those. And then the civil improvements along Stanton Street. Now, the civil improvements primarily are involved with making certain we had sufficient funds in our adequacy to go in and do complete pavement replacement down in the, if you've driven down towards the cathedral area, down around there, the pavement is in real bad shape. We were able to replace most of that pavement. It's really bad pavement, rather than trying to overlay it. Up on the northern side, to make certain that we had good coverage, we were able to do a mill and overlay there, so we have a nice smooth bike trail, and plus a nice smooth traffic trail. So we think we've improved the roadway improvements along Stanton there over and above what the original design was. Then we did the modified pavement, signal and pavement marking plans, and we really increased the signalization on this to do 2 things. One of them is to provide adequate, make certain that we protected the riders of the streetcar. The other one is to provide protection for the bike trail there and signaling for the bike trail. This even includes a hawk signal there down around Washington, which is the one that basically, that's the light you were talking about. So we have at least one at Washington. We'd love to have put them in all of them, but we had to be judicious with our funds. The cumulative effect of this change order is an increase of $2,265,272, and we'd increase. But I want to make it clear about this. What we're really doing is I'm taking money from allocated budget, which we'd already allocated to the improvement in each one of these sections there, and just included it in the contract. Our intent is, you might say, at the end of the project to use up, I'm not going to say we're going to spend it frivolously, but to use up the allocated budget. This is in standard practice where we've assumed that these costs are going to be here. At the very end of this, when I go over it, I'll explain to you or show you where we have been on our percent of contingency and how we managed to track it. But this is the extent of this for change order number 6. Some of the costs that were involved on this is the systems costs were, $440,000. The track modifications were $280,000. Those are the primary costs. That plus the stops modifications were the primary costs associated with relocating the line itself. The Stanton underground work, this is the water and sewer utilities that we've identified that went, go ahead and need to be replaced. We had the budget to do it, so we went ahead and did it. The civil improvements, as I said, is improving the roadway, plus making certain that we've got a nice smooth bike trail along there. And then the signal plans, the big cost in the signal plans is updating the traffic signal system to accommodate the bike trail and to accommodate the safety aspects of the station stops. This is a picture of the new station stop there, and the station stops have been really upgraded. The ones before were basically not much more than sidewalks, improvements with a little leaning rail on most of them where they could kind of lean again and separate them from the remainder of the sidewalk. What we've done here is that we've got a protected area there. You can see it's right at the signal location, right at the crosswalk location, a protected area there. We also have handrail all the way around three sides of it there to protect them from ongoing traffic. We widened out the station just a little bit, or the stop a little bit, to give adequate room for the handicap to make certain they can get out. So we feel confident that we've got one. These are very, very similar, by the way, to some of the stops that are used in cities where the light rail or the trolley goes down the center of the street. In Phoenix and Tempe, for instance, it goes down the center of the street. And these are not quite as, you know, the ones in Phoenix have the awnings and art and everything. These don't have that, but they're very, very similar in that, and they do have the same signal protection that we've managed to do. This is just a sample. We're going to be going down showing the signal, the traffic, track realignment as we're putting the track in. They're going to be starting that as early next year. Change order number 7 incorporates additional storm sewer and pavement improvements in the Santa Fe, Kansas, and Father Rom roadway areas down in the CBD 4 section. These improvements were requested by the city as part of the Central Business District Phase 4 Capital Improvements Plan. Originally, we were proposed to put temporary pavement in there. The city has come in and requested that we put permanent pavement in. They had requested and gave us a design to upgrade the storm sewer system, and which we've, you know, this is what this change order is for. It includes a modification of curbs and ramps on South Kansas Street so we could put the handicap ramps in accordance with the TxDOT procedures and the Father Rom and storage procedures. We have about we currently have $278,224 of allocated contingency that was provided by the city for this work. And the city will provide us another $375,000 to give us a total of $653,000. The cumulative effect of the change order is about $626,000, which leaves us an additional $27,000 contingency as we finish, you know, to use if we need to, as we finish up the work in December or in January and stuff like that. So we feel we're comfortable with this one. Just to give you an idea of the cost, modifications to the ADA ramps would cost us about $4,200. It's a small amount, but we wanted to incorporate it. Then the storm sewer and pavement modifications of $621,000, which will be funded by the city. This is a picture right now of what Father Rom looks like. We just kind of finished some of the pavement there. We'll be finishing up after the first of the year. Change order number 8 consists of the resolutions of some miscellaneous issues across base bid 1. The change order includes adjustment of the bid quantities and additive changes to the work scope and contract price throughout the project. And the specific elements shown on the following, on the plans include, we made some changes and modifications to the MSF shades, the mural design, and the concrete wall configuration at the maintenance and storage facility. This was working with the architect and the contractor and the operations people. Sun Metro now has their operations person on board, so he's been going through it and identifying areas where we could make it more efficient. So that was one item. The second item was, as we were going through and getting ready to dig the OCS foundations, we identified a need to do potholing there to keep us from having to have our drill rig have Hardy Ho coming in as they do their drilling, hit a water line or primarily a communications line. So we added an item so we could do potholing in those areas here. That just keeps us from having to tear up a line, or tearing up a line inadvertently. That would be, it's saving it really. The next item is for irrigation repairs associated with the OCS foundations. As we've gone in there, we've discovered a lot of irrigation lines, primarily city lines, that we were not aware of, and we just need to put an account in there for that. The next one is changes to the mechanical plan within the maintenance and storage facility. The MSF, or Sun Metro, wants to add a couple of rooms in there. They took a lot at the circulation, so we had to do some modifications to the electrical mechanical system to incorporate that. The last item in this here is the colored stamped concrete pavement and crosswalks along Santa Fe, primarily in front of the convention center there on Santa Fe and San Antonio, isn't it? Yes, Santa Fe and San Antonio, Santa Fe and Maine, and then up at Franklin there at the ballpark there. This job was originally bid out by the contractor. That was under construction, and the job did not include the stamped concrete. That had been added later. So what we had to do is we've got to put a bid item in there so we can put that stamped concrete in there. Just to give you some cost, the costs range from $8,000 for the shades and mural design and concrete wall modifications to payment for the stamped and concrete pavement of $96,000, which it would be a unit price, so that's a rounded off figure, and it's a unit price there. The potholing of that is $43,000, and then $28,000 for the repair of the city irrigation lines. As we can see there, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see the ventilation system of the mechanical changes, and that's where most of the thing, we had to go in and modify the ventilation system to accommodate the new office spaces. Here's a picture of, this happens to be at San Antonio where the colored concrete is, and that's what we need a bid item for, so we can continue that in the other areas that the city's requested us to do. And we want to accommodate them because they've been working closely with us, as you know, we've been coming down San Antonio, and they've requested it. It was there originally, so I think we need to put it back in. The impact of the budget, a change order summary is, we had an allocated contingency of $3.8 million plus additional $375,000 from the city of El Paso for change order number 7. We take the allocated contingency and we reduce it by change orders 6, 7, and 8. Gives us a remaining allocated contingency of about $1.14 million, and then remaining unallocated contingency of $1.6 million or 1.7. It has no real impact on the schedule. Has no real impact on the schedule, and it'll be completed within the schedule of the project. The infrastructure project, as I said, remains on schedule and budget. The revised budget with these change orders would now be $66,096,326. To date, the work completed as of November 25th is $31,750,342, and we have work remaining of $34,345,984. That's work remaining as of November 25th. The contingency remaining as a percentage of remaining work without the additional funds is roughly 7.07%. If we get when we get the additional city funds, That will kick the remaining contingency back up to 8.16%. When we started the project, the allocated contingency for the project was roughly 8%, and we've managed to track as we've built the project, we've used up contingency, and we've managed to track, we're still at the neighborhood of 7 to 8%. So we feel real comfortable that we're policing and husbanding our contingency so we don't run out of contingency before we finish the project. We're real comfortable about that. Anyway, do you have any questions?
Any questions? Are you getting comfortable with the middle of the road?
No, my concerns were addressed. I just couldn't see from the drawing, so I'm comfortable with it. I do have one question. If we go back to change order number 6, can we go back to that slide?
Sure. Well,
Underground water and sanitary sewer lines on Stanton Street.
yeah.
So are those for our convenience or for the city's convenience?
They're basically for the city's convenience or for the city water's convenience. There are 2 small ones that are for our convenience, but as we went through there, we discovered them, that a couple of lines that had not been identified that we needed to be replaced. So while we were at it, we went ahead and replaced those lines. We could have replaced a small portion they wanted. We did have contingency available. They actually were underrunning, so we've had the contingency available to build those.
Okay, my only point was, and I hope this isn't taken, that if it's the city line and it doesn't need to be replaced by us and we go ahead and replace it, shouldn't that be their expense, Mr. Tejas, and not ours?
Yes, so we can look at that. What we're doing right now is actually we're developing a list of items that, having increased costs for the project, requested change orders by Sun Metro that we have not implemented yet that would have to be paid by them. So we've got this running list, and I hope January, February at the absolute latest, I'll be back before the full board with a listing of all of those and which the city has agreed to pay for.
Okay.
So I'll make sure and include this in that conversation.
I just point of clarification. Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions? Concerns?
Is it possible for me to make a comment as a member, a citizen?
Yes, of course.
Come on.
Subject to the board's approval.
Hello, my name's Signe Niemer, and I am actually here because I work for the county attorney's office. But this is my street, Stanton. I drive to work on it every day, and so I stayed to hear the discussion about the changes here. And as I look at this, what I see as the impact is that you are taking a 4-lane road down to a 2-lane road. And every morning I drive to work down that road, and it is full of traffic. There are football games, basketball games, graduations, people going to school at UTEP. If I go to work on Oregon Street, which I have done a lot lately, there are still 4 lanes of traffic, even though we have the bus terminal there, we have a bike lane, we have the rails, and those are shared. And so my concern with this design would be the reduction of this road from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. And I didn't really hear any discussion about the traffic impact. Heard a lot of discussion about the safety impact. But what happens about the traffic?
So what I would say about that is that was an issue that was raised with the city when the original idea came up to pursue this realignment. We presented this to the city of El Paso, and specifically Ted Marquez and the Public Works Director, and asked them about that. And that's why when I mentioned that there were traffic studies done, there were vehicle counts done, all of that work was done in advance to determine whether or not the city streets and maintenance, specifically the Streets and Maintenance Division, could get comfortable with a reduction in lanes. And the answer from the city was yes. So
Based on what?
On the traffic volumes that are today and projected, and based on all of those evaluations that they do associated with those traffic projections.
Look, I'm just old-fashioned. I don't get it. I mean, I'm not piling on here. I understand what she's saying, but if we're already, I mean, just drive there on the night that UTEP plays basketball like last night, and we're going to go to 2 lanes on a major thoroughfare, and then there's increased commercial activity on Mesa with the development of the Montecito project. I don't see how the traffic counts could justify that. I mean, I'm just at a loss. I'd really like to see their numbers to see what time of the day they did their counts. And there's all kinds of events in that area all the time. Plus UTEP, when school's in session, that's of great concern because that street under normal conditions, and I'm not against what we're doing, I'm just bringing up a comment, is very busy.
So
As an alternative, because Mesa is impossible with the increase in traffic. I mean, it's just a concern. I would really like to hear from the city on how they came about that decision. But I'm just speaking as a concerned citizen because I drive in that area extensively also. And I'm not piling on, but I think she brings up a really good fact.
So the ultimate response for me is that the RMA didn't do the traffic numbers.
No, I understand.
But the Streets and Maintenance Division were able to get comfortable with those numbers. Now I can look into that and see what they were looking at. I think part of that conversation was that Stanton absolutely can get difficult during the peak periods, but during the rest of the day it's not like that. That was part of the conversation, but again, it's hard for me to answer that question without
I understand.
seeing what the city was looking at. But I'll ask for that information.
Mr. Gardner, do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, if I could address one thing, she's correct. One of the issues that the city had the designer look at as they were looking at this here is to look at the turning movements. What creates the peak on it as you go down Stanton is the left turn movements there at Schuster. So one of the biggest elements, and this is one of the cost elements that's in the traffic signal, is redoing the traffic signals there, allowing for the dual left turns at the Stanton area there. We actually shifted things around to allow for it there, and then upgraded the traffic signal system right there at those where those left turns are, which will help clear out the intersection there such that the traffic can then continue to flow in there. It's also set up such that, and this is where we need to be careful, it's actually more of a 3-lane roadway as opposed to that. And then as you get further down, there's actually 2 lanes on it. The single lane aspect is up where the parking is. As you get further down, there will actually be 2 lanes, especially southbound. And that's one of the things they did look at. I'm the construction manager, not the designer, but I do know that the designer did spend a lot of time looking at the signalization, the turning movements, and working with the city to assure that it did meet the traffic volumes and what the city anticipated there.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Okay.
Any other questions, concerns? So we have an item number 7. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 7 has been approved. No other business in front of the RMA today. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the CRMA is adjourned at 10:45 on December 14th. Thank you.